Auzubillahiminash-shaytanir-rajeem. Bismillahir-rahmanir-rahim. Today is the third of a four-day Majalis series at IEC Husseini, recited by Hujjatul Islam Moulana Rizwan Rizvi of New Jersey. We would like to get started with the recitation of Salam by Brother Ali Haider, followed by Marcia recited by Brother Ali Raza. Please recite aloud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa rajil farajum.
बिस्मिल्लाह अलिया
फातिहा। सलवात। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला
सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद वजल्ल
तासहर रोती रही मादर मुज़तर असग़र। तासहर रोती रही मादर मुज़तर असग़र। कैसी गुज़री कहो शब कब्र के अंदर असग़र। कैसी गुज़री कहो शब कब्र के अंदर असग़र। ये न था इल्म के बानों को ये दिन होगा नसीब। ये न था इल्म के बानों को ये दिन होगा नसीब। आएगी खबर पर तेरे तेरी मादर असग़र। पर मोहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद वाले मोहम्मद वअज्जिल फरजहम। सलामी सुए मख्तल सैयद अबरार आते हैं। हथेली पर धरे सर खल्क़ के सरदार आते। हथेली पर धरे सर खल्क़ के सरदार आते हैं। हमारे ख्वाब में जब सैयदे अबरार आते हैं। मुबारक बाद देने ताले बेदार आते। मुबारक बाद देने ताले बेदार आते हैं। जिगर में दर्द लब पर आंसू दोनों आँखों में। बड़े सामान से हजरत के मातमदार आते। बड़े सामान से हजरत के मातमदार आते हैं। ख्याले शाह वाला में दिले मुज़तर ये कहता है। उठ दर्द जिगर ताज़ीम को सरकार आते। उठ दर्द जिगर ताज़ीम को सरकार आते हैं। किसाने के फिदा किस शान से रन में हुसैन आए। यूं ही आते हैं बस मरने को जो तैयार आते। यूं ही आते हैं बस मरने को जो तैयार आते हैं। सवारी है अकबर की के कुदरत का नमूना है। शबाहत कह रही है अहमद मुख्तार आते। शबाहत कह रही है अहमद मुख्तार आते हैं। अभी खैमे से निकले भी न थे, गुल मच गया रन में। अलंबरदार आते हैं, अलंबरदार आते, अलंबरदार आते हैं, अलंबरदार आते हैं। सलामी सुए मख्तर। अल्लाहुम्मा सल्ली अला मुहम्मद व आले मुहम्मद वअज्जिल फरजहum।
Salman. अज़ान अकबर ने जैसे दी होगी, होंगे मातम हुसैनो ज़ैनब के। आज़ादारी गली गली होगी, अज़ान अकबर जैसे ही होगी। शय से उठता नहीं जवां लाशा, शय से उठता नहीं जवां लाशा। गाजी अब्बास की कमी होगी, अज़ान अकबर जैसे दी होगी। दारे कूफा पे सर था बाका, दारे कूफा पे सर था बाका। बेटी मुस्लिम की देखती होगी, अज़ान अकबर जैसे दी होगी। फिक्र ज़ैनब को होगी आबिद की, फिक्र ज़ैनब को होगी आबिद की आग ख़ैमों में जब लगी होगी अज़ान अकबर ने जैसे दी होगी। जियो 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 सलमान
माशाअल्लाह माशाअल्लाह।
सलमान मुझसे इसलिए आया नहीं करबल कोई मुझसे इसलिए आया नहीं करबल कोई भाई उसको ज़ैनब तेरे अब्बास से डर लगता मुसद्दस इसके दो बंद इंशाअल्लाह, उसके बाद मर्सिया सलमान शाम हरम इमाम उमम
वाह 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 या अली अली
परों पे पहलुओं पे सरों चरणों पे घरों पर अली अली फिरदौस के तमाम दरों पर अली अली दरों पर अली अली नारे अली अली के जो है अहले होश में नारे अली अली के जो है अहले होश में कौसर झलक रहा है मोहब्बत के जोश मोहब्बत के जोश में
Dad's not coming in it.
Fatiha.
जज़ाकल्लाह अलैहि भाई, जज़ाकल्लाह।
जिंदा में जबकि दोख्तर शबीर मर गई, अरे जिंदा में जबकि दोख्तर शबीर मर गई, अरे दुनिया से वतन सफर को कर गई, अरे कुनबे के दिल पे दाग जुदाई कर गई, अरे बोल पड़ गया हुसैन की आशिक़ गुजर गई, अरे बोल पड़ गया हुसैन की आशिक़ गुजर गई, अरे जन्नत बसाई छोड़ के दुनिया के बाद को, अरे ताज़ा किया है फिर अली, अरे ताज़ा किया है फिर अली असग़र के लाखों, अरे बाज़ू हिला के बानुए नाशाद ने कहा, अरे बीबी पे दर के सर से उठाओ तो सर जरा, अरे बातें अभी तो करती थी आंसू बहा बहा, अरे साकित नज़्हाए ग़ज़ब तो दस्तो पा, अरे साकित नज़्हाए ग़ज़ब दस्तो पा, अरे मुँह देखते ही जिसका नक्शा बदल गया, अरे किस बात सांस रुक गई, किस बात सांस रुक गई, गाना निकल गया, अरे माँ सत जाए आज तड़पती थी शाम से, अरे रूठी हुई थी मादर नाशाद काम से, अरे मिलकर मिले हुसैन, अरे मिलकर मिले हुसैन अलैहिस्सलाम से, अरे बीबी कहो गिले क्यों हुए क्या क्या इमाम से, अरे बीबी कहो गिले हुए क्या क्या इमाम से, अरे यूं मुँह को मोड़ना तो मोहब्बत से दूर है, अरे कुर्बान जाऊं माँ का, अरे कुर्बान जाऊं माँ का, भला क्या कसूर है, अरे लो हाथ जोड़ती है ये माँ है सकीना जान, अरे मुझको बुला लो तुम हो जहाँ है सकीना जान, अरे ढूंढूं निकल के तुमको कहाँ है सकीना जान, अरे मादर को कब्र है ये मकान है सकीना जान, अरे मादर को कब्र है ये मकान है सकीना जान, अरे मैं जानती हूँ मौत से बदतर हयात, अरे अब कौन सोएगा मेरे, अरे अब कौन सोएगा मेरे पहलू में रात को, अरे यहाँ किसके पास रहती शहे करबला नहीं, अरे बीबी के नाज उठाने की खातिर चचा नहीं, अरे नादार माँ है पानी नहीं और ग़िज़ा नहीं, अरे पर कफन के वास्ते हाय हाय रवा नहीं, अरे पर कफन के वास्ते हाय हाय विदा नहीं, अरे अम्मा के पास रहने की ईज़ा उठा चुकी, अरे बीबी तमाचे खा चुकी, अरे बीबी तमाचे खा चुकी, गर्दन बना चुकी, अरे बाची ये माँ तुझे किधर ढूंढने को जाए, गम रसीदा तूने क़यामत के दिन उठा, अरे छुटकर पेदर से घुड़कियाँ, अरे छुटकर पेदर से घुड़कियाँ आई तमाचे का, अरे वारी रसन बंदी तेरी गर्दन में हाय, अरे वारी रसन बंदी तेरी गर्दन में हाय, अरे जो शक्तियाँ फलक ने दिखाई वो सह गई, अरे बूंदे जो छिन गए मेरा, अरे बूंदे जो छिन गए मेरा मुँह तक गिर गई।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajam. Before we get started, we have one brief announcement. Moulana Ali Raza Rizvi Syed will be reciting Majalis for IC the upcoming Tuesday through next Saturday. Today is the third of a 4-day Majalis series at IEC Seni, recited by Hujjatul Islam, Moulana Rizwan Rizvi of New Jersey, on the topic of Marifat Imam Zaman. Without further delay, we would like to welcome Moulana. Please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين أبي القاسم محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين الذين ذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى وقوله الحق وهو أصدق القائلين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وعد الله الذين آمنوا منكم وعملوا الصالحات ليستخلفنهم في الأرض كما استخلف الذين من قبلهم وليمكنن لهم دينهم الذي ارتضى لهم وليبدلنهم من بعد خوفهم أمنا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. As announced, this is the third majlis in the series of 4 majalis under the topic of Marifat of Imam Zamana, Ajjalallahu ta'ala farajahu sharif. For the past 2 nights, we've been discussing under this topic to increase our marifat and our recognition to Imam of our time. I had recited initially in the first 2 nights the ayat from Surah Bani Israel, ayat number 71, which says, يَوْمَ نَدْعُو كل أناس بإمامهم. And last night when we were discussing under this ayah, we had explained and recited 3 more verses which talk about or serve as the evidence of the reappearance of Imam Zamana. Many other verses also exist, and therefore in order to shed light on some of them and continue our discussion from last night, I began the majlis tonight with this ayat of Surah Nur, ayat number 55, which is one of the ayat which talks about the reappearance of Imam and the governance of Imam. It says, Allah has promised, وَعَدَ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, to those who have brought faith, وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ, and of course those along with their faith have done عَمَلِ صالح, righteous deeds, that we will surely make them successors in the earth, just as He made those who were before them successors on the earth, and He will surely establish for them their religion which He approved for them. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمُ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and that He will surely change their state to security after fear. So when you're struggling, when you're going through a difficult time, when there's fear, when there's no sense of security, and you feel that you're being oppressed, there's a promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at that point. This ayat number 55 of Surah Nur talks about it, that it is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as long as you keep these 2 things, which is Iman and Amal Salih, Allah will revive and bring the glory back to you. And of course, those who are oppressed and weak, they will be given power, and there will be an Imam for them who will be the leader. In the book of Ghaiba by Shaykh Tusi, he narrates that this verse was revealed for Imam Mahdi والسلام, and his companions. Now, of course, you will say, well, there's a context of revelation of all of the ayat. So there's tafsir and the tatbiq of ayat. Tatbiq of this ayat, mutabiqat of this ayat, application of this ayat is Imam Zamana. Of course, Imam was not alive at the time when this ayat was revealed, because this ayat was revealed on to the Holy Prophet. So there was the actual context of revelation, which we don't deny. The context in which this verse was revealed was the migration of Muslims towards Medina. And after they had migrated, there was this constant struggle that they were going through against the mushrikeen of Mecca and against the Arabs because of the revenge that they wanted. And moreover, Muslims used to, carry the weapons all over the place. If they go for trade, they will be carrying the weapons. If they're, going for another travel, which is not for trade, or even if they were sleeping, they had to be ready all the time, and they would sleep with weapons with them, because they could be in a war at any time, and they could be attacked at any time. Here the question was asked, until when do we live like this? How long this will continue? This verse was revealed. It gives them a message that those who possess Iman and those who have the quality of righteous deed, Iman and Amal Saleh, they will receive 3 glad tidings. Number 1, governance and the rule on earth. So striving believers will be made deputies on earth. That's number 1. Number 2 is spread of true doctrine can be understood, that He will make the religion that He has chosen for them stand supreme. And lastly, all the means of fear and trouble will be removed. These 3 things which you are suffering, you don't have the power, you don't have the government, your religion is not recognized, and you're living in constant fear, all 3 things will be removed. So this is a very straightforward ayat as far as the government which is being promised, or the hukumat of Imam of the time, Imam Zamana, when he reappears, is being mentioned over here. Similar ayat in Surah Qasas as well as in Surah Hadid talk about the weakness that people have. وَنُرِيدُ أَن نَمُنَّ عَلَى الَّذِينَ اسْتُضْعِفُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, that we desire to give favor to those who are abased. وَنَجْعَلَهُمْ أَئِمَّةً وَنَجْعَلَهُمُ الْوَارِثِينَ. We'll make them the أئمة and the rulers and the leaders, and we'll make them the heirs. Continuing, Sheikh Atusi mentions that Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, who said in the tafsir of this ayah that the people who were abased in the land are the children of the Prophet. Allah will raise their Mahdi and they will regain the honor and respect while their enemies will be humiliated. So these ayat constantly, and there are many such ayat that exist. In fact, Allama Majlisi in Bihar al-Anwar, when he addresses these ayat, he said, God will reform the dead land after the awakening of its inhabitants with the reappearance of Qaim of Ali Muhammad. And then he narrates 60 some ayat from Quran, which are reflecting on the topic of Imam Zamana. If anyone is interested in knowing and studying, you can refer to Bihar al-Anwar, volume number 60, which has all of these ayat, 60 some ayat that are mentioned by Allama Majlisi in this. Sixth Imam, Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi wassalam, he said, if someone believes in, these are all the proofs, by the way. And then sixth Imam adds on to it. He said, if someone believes in all of the Imams, but denies Imam Mahdi, it is as if he believed in all of the Anbiya and denied Khatimul Anbiya, the Holy Prophet. What more of a proof do you need? And then he further explains. He says, it's not like when Imam will come, everything will be fixed and everyone will be rightly guided and they'll all become Muslims, just the fact that Imam has arrived. This will not be without, resistance. Don't think for a second about that. Some will resist. Quran talks about the followers of those other religions in Surah Ma'idah that surely many of them will be increased in rebellion and unfaith. They will start war. They will stand up against Imam. But this is where, because this religion is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the teachings of this religion are so beautiful that this is where you will play your part, paving the path for Imam by mentioning the mahasin of this religion, because it'll attract people toward it like a magnet. You just need to show them the realities of it, not the false practices which will turn people off. For example, if I was to say, sitting here, that I'm the best example of Hawza Ilmiya, majority of you will be turned off by Hawza. If this is the best example of Hawza, then may God be with Hawza. But if I was to say, no, I'm just an ordinary student of the system, and then name, for example, say Sistani, Sayyid Khamenei, Sheikh Wahid, Sayyid Al-Hakim, Sheikh Makarim Shirazi, Shaheed Sadr, Shaheed Mutahari, Sheikh Bashir, all of these names. Now that's a lineup which is very impressive. These are also the products of the same Hawza. So therefore, don't paint everyone with the same brush. Likewise, in a small institution of Hawza, you find such disparity between students like me and the lineup that I just mentioned for you. Then imagine in the religion, which is 1.5 billion strong, there are many incomplete, underachieved, and non-practicing Muslims that exist. So if there lies a fault, it's in us and not necessarily in the system. How do you feel when, especially the Western media, compares all the Muslims and paints them all with the same brush as ISIS, as Al-Qaeda, as Taliban? That's an unfair judgment on their part. They treat everyone, they look everyone as Muslims, regardless of how one is dealing with things and how one is performing their duties. Marhum Jamaluddin Asadabadi, he said, we must admit that we aren't Muslims. We have adopted some practices from other cultures, such as Hindus, and from other parts of the world, such as West, and named it Islam. Just look at our rituals, at our weddings, and even sacred institution of Azadari is affected because of some of these rituals. The way we meet and greet people, our behavior, character, everything is lacking Islam. And therefore, we shouldn't relax and just sit and say, well, everything will be fixed once Imam arrives. Automatically, everything will be rebooted, for example, and reset it. No, that's not how it works. You need to be someone who's anticipating the return. You need to be someone who, waiting itself is a very, it's an undertaking. The philosophy of waiting, rather, that you wait for someone whom you trust. If there's no trust, then you don't anticipate waiting for that person. You wait for someone whom you consider beneficial. Otherwise, if someone fears the arrival of Imam, that'll be dangerous for us, that we will be the first ones in line of Imam who will be killed or perished, then you don't anticipate waiting for that Imam. Those who are weak and those who are oppressed believe in the arrival more sincerely because they're suffering on the land. And that's where you understand the azamat of this intizar. The difference between the Jews and the Muslim is Prophet Moses, Hazrat Musa alayhi wasalam, went for 40 days. They started worshiping a calf. We are waiting for 12 centuries and we still have this firm belief of the Savior who will reappear, who will arrive. So we're constantly in this struggle. They couldn't resist for 40 days. And they started worshiping someone other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why I'll remind you of that hadith of fourth Imam who said that the followers of Akhir al-Zaman are superior and their level or their thawab is the reward of Shaheed of Badr and Uhud. And so there's so many examples of people who have dedicated their lives. There's a story about father of Ayatollah Sistani. His name was Syed Muhammad Baqir Sistani. He did what is called Chilla of Ziyarat Ashura. Chilla means 40 days. Chihil, right? Comes from 40. 40 days he made the nadar of reciting Ziyarat Ashura. Or for 40 weeks. Once at least in a week. And so for 40 weeks he will recite Ziyarat Ashura. With the recitation of Ziyarat Ashura, there are wonders that could happen. Today the world is contradicting this ziyarah, but the karamat that are associated with this ziyarat, so many people have mentioned about it. There are books that have been written in the tashrih and then the karamat that are associated with this ziyarat. So make sure that it is recited. He said he made this nazar to recite it for 40 days or for 40 weeks, once a week, every week, in different masajid of Mashhad. And he said on the day 40th day, when he was reciting it, he knew that something will happen. He said, while I was busy reciting, I saw nur coming from not too far away. I quickly finished Ziyarat Ashura and I started moving toward that nur. I saw there was a house and apparently there was a janaza because people had gathered over there and someone had passed away. So I arrived over there, paid my condolences to the family. I saw they were weeping. I went inside the house. After giving the tasliyat and condolences, I went into the room where this nur was coming from. All this point I'm thinking that this has to do with this deceased. This person who has died, is his nur that is emerging. He said, I saw that janaza, and near that janaza, I saw this very holy personality who was the reason behind this nur which was emerging. Possibly Imam Zamana, because no one else was noticing him. He was sitting there near this janaza, 2 steps away from this janaza. He said, father of Ayatollah Sistani said, I conveyed my salam to Imam Zamana because I recognized him. I said it softly, and Imam replied softly, Alaykum salam. And then he said, oh, so-and-so, you don't need to do this chilla for 40 days. You don't need to, reciting this ziyarat is good, but you don't have to do these amal to meet us. Be like this lady whose janaza Imam was attending, and we will come and visit you. And then the mahfil was ended and the janazah was taken away, he asked the family members, what was it that your mother did? Of course, he didn't want to reveal that Imam Zamana was present in this gathering. He said, what did your mother do? They said in the time of Raza Shah, there was a ban on hijab. No woman was allowed to practice hijab. When they would step out, they must remove it. You've seen these bans in European countries. He said, this lady, after hearing that there's a ban on hijab, did not leave her house for 8 years. And then she died. And Imam Zamana was present and visiting her and accompanying her at the last moment of her life, at the time of ihtizar, at the time that she passed away. And the riwayat from 8th Imam as well, that if you come and visit me, I will visit you in different places. And one of them is at the time of your death. Another one is in time when you are placed in your graves. And then, of course, on the day of mahshar. So in this time that we live in, this ghaybat, as we call it, the occultation, the period in which we are waiting. Some mention that, is it allowed for us to call Imam by his name? There was this discussion that it was haram to call the name of Imam. Of course, we know his name is Muhammad. That's why Prophet said, Awwaluna Muhammad wa akhiruna Muhammad. His name is Muhammad and his title is Mahdi. So he said, is naming Imam, is it permissible or it's not? Some used to say, well, it is haram to say his name. And the reason was because Imam's birth and then his occultation, the minor occultation, which is Ghaybat al-Sughra, it was also secret, that they did not want anyone talking about Imam Zamana by naming him, because that could lead to the Abbasids rulers who would go ahead and find out where Imam was, and they will eventually reach up to Imam. So Imam was communicating through those 4 of his representatives, one after another, and this was all done in such secrecy that they did not want Imam's name to be heard by someone's tongue, lest people would take a lead and find a lead, and then they will get to Imam Zamana somehow. So maybe out of taqiyya, but today there's no such thing. So saying his name Mahdi or saying his name Muhammad, there's no holds bars. It's not haram. It's not forbidden. In fact, it is okay. It's allowed. So these are some of the names and the alqab that we find of Imam Zamana. One is the narration that in reference to his name Mahdi. Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib والسلام, when he was asked about this name, he said, Allah will expose hidden deeds from him that no one ever knew of those things. He said, إِذَا قَامَ مَهْدِيُنَا أَهْلُ الْبَيْتِ قَسَّمَا بِالسَّوِيَّةِ, that when Mahdi will stand up, will rise, he will divide the wealth equally. وَعَدَلَ فِي الرَّعْيَةِ, he will deal with justice with his people. مَنْ أَطَاعَهُ فَقَدْ أَطَاعَ اللَّهِ وَمَنْ عَصَاهُ فَقَدْ عَصَى اللَّهِ. Whoever obeys him indeed obeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and whoever disobeyed him indeed disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَإِنَّمَا سُمِّيَ الْمَهْدِي لِأَنَّهُ يَهْدِي إِلَىٰ أَمْرٍ خَفِيٍّ. He's named Mahdi because he will guide people to that secret, that Amr Khafi, which we do not know, those secret commands that will be told, will be revealed once he arrives. So that's one name of his. Second name or title that we know Imam from is Qa'im, as Qa'im Ali Muhammad, the one who's standing. Qa'im literally means the one who's standing, right? Abu Hamza from 5th Imam asked about this name. He said, aren't you all Qa'im bil Haqq? Qa'im means the one who's standing for the truth, for the reality, for the Haqq. Imam replied, yes. When Imam Hussein was martyred, he saw him standing and praying to Allah and said, I will use him to take revenge of Hussein. And therefore, Imam Mahdi is referred to as Qa'im Ali Muhammad, the one who will rise and the one who will take the revenge. So that's one of his, one of the titles of Allah is also Muntaqim, And the titles of Imam Zamana is also Muntaqim, that he will take the intiqam. Third title of Imam is Muntazar. We are Muntazireen, he is Muntazar, because his followers are anxiously waiting for him. So that's very simple to understand. One of his names, Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman, and we say Muntazar, the one who's awaited. He's called Sahib al-Amr as well, because his obedience is wajib, as was mentioned in the previous ayat or previous riwayat from 5th Imam, including those who will reappear in his time amongst the prophets. Because Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu ati'ullah wa ati'ur rasul wa ulil amri minkum. He is the ulul amr amongst them, and therefore everyone will obey Sahib al-Amr, even those who are returning, those who are prophets who will be returning at that time, the concept of Raja'at. He's also called Hujjat, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his Hujjat, and the earth will never be void of the Hujjat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He's the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore it says, Inna lillahi hujjatain, hujjatun zahira wa hujjatun batina. Allah has two types of proofs. One is the zahiri and the apparent hujjat, and the second is hujjat batina. Prophets and imams are the hujjat zahira of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Both types of hujjats will end with Imam Zamana. He's also referred to as Baqiyatullah. That's a very interesting name. That upon his reappearance, he will lean onto the wall of Kaaba with his companions over there, and he will recite this ayat from Surah Hud, Baqiyatullah khairul lakum in kuntum mu'minin. What remains of Allah's provision is better for you, only if you were believers in it. So that is also proving the fact that whatever remains from Allah's provision, this is the last of the provisions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will be provided to you. So he's referred to as Baqiyatullah. And one of his name is Ghaib. Yes, while he's Ghaib, literally, his name is also Ghaib. Hidden, which has been explained by Prophet and Imams, that so that people will be prepared for it and not deny his existence. The ayat of Surah Baqarah that from the very beginning talks about Allazina yu'minuna bil ghaib. If you refer to the tafsir of this ayat, the initial ayat of Surah Baqarah, Allazina yu'minuna bil ghaib. In tafsir of this ayah, many have alluded to the fact that those who believe in the ghaibat of Imam Zamana. Why it's kept hidden from us? Why don't we know the date and the time that when he will arrive? Similar to how we don't know when our death will come upon us. When we don't know this amr, that means what? We'll remain steadfast. We'll remain on our toes. Or at least that's how it should be. When you're uncertain about something that could happen at any moment, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen 100 years from now. So you're ready for it. You're prepared for it. You're constantly working for it. Remember the story that we had narrated amongst the 4 kids of that father. Which one are you going to be? This also proves how different, there is when it comes to meeting Imam Zamana. Although he's ghaib, I just narrated the story before, that there are aqsam and the types of ghaibat. One's, this is shakhs ghaib. At another place, it's the shakhsiyat which is ghaib. What's the difference between the two? At one point, the person himself is missing. The second point, his personality is missing. These are two different things. I'm just giving this example so that the children would understand. But of course, there's no comparison, none whatsoever. Majority of the people, those who know me, they have seen me in this attire, and they recognize me when they see me in this attire. But of course, I don't keep this attire on all the time, especially when I'm traveling at the airports. I'm not walking around like this. So I've run into many people, those who did not recognize me. I recognize them because I saw them like that, but they failed to recognize me because they have never seen me like this. So when you have shakhs ghaib, that means the person himself is missing. But when you have shakhsiyat ghaib, that means the personality is missing. Shakhs may be there, but his personality, because you don't recognize him like this, is missing. And this is where Imam is around us. His wujud is not an issue of aqaid. Pay attention to this. His issue, his wujud of Imam Mahdi is not an issue of aqidat or aqaid or our beliefs. Rather, it is the issue of the sadaqat and the righteousness of the Holy Prophet. Because Prophet said that there will be 12 Khalifa after me. Last of them will be Mahdi. All of them will be from Quraysh. All of them will be from Banu Hashim. They are from the children of Fatima and Ali. And the 9th one after Hussein will be Mahdi, who will be the son of Hassan Askari. All of this is mentioned. When Rasulullah is mentioning with such minor details, then is there any way to deny the existence of Imam Mahdi? So it's not about the aqaid, rather it is about the sadaqat. And then of course, at this moment, a lot of people raise some doubts. Okay, so we believe that there is a Mahdi. But how do you comprehend that? How can someone become Imam at such a young age? You mentioned that our 11th Imam, his shahadat is in the year 260. Wiladat of 12th Imam is in the year 255. That means he was only 5 years old. How can a 5-year-old be an Imam? Although the historical facts are there, that the janazah of 11th Imam was led by 12th Imam. When he came, he saw his uncle was leading. He pulled him from his abba and said, this is my haqq, this is my right. And 11th Imam had already introduced the 12th Imam, but it had to be done in secret. The same way Hazrat Musa والسلام, and his birth was so secret that Pharaoh had ordered 70,000 children that were born to be killed because someone had told him that this year a child will be born who will topple your government. So he said, well, kill all of them. The mother of Hazrat Musa, she became scared. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't worry. La tahzani. Rather, put him fil yamme, alqihi fil yamme. Wa inna radduhu ilayk. Put him into this chest and let him go into the river, and we will return him back to you. This is the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just imagine a mother who's got this infant. Pharaoh is going around killing all the infants. The only place she feels safety of the child is with her. But وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَىٰ أُمِّ مُوسَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to the mother of Hazrat Musa, if you want safety, then trust us. Leave him. He's better off being away from you than be with you. If he's going to be with you, then he will be killed. So she lets him know. Sister of Hazrat Musa plays a very major role. She walks along, seeing that where this chest is going, not letting anyone feel suspicious of her existence. And then where does this chest arrive? At the doorstep of, because the house and the palace of Pharaoh ended at the bank of the river, that's where this chest arrived. And this is where the wife of Pharaoh, Hazrat Asiya, her role is shown. That how she said to Pharaoh, that let him live. Maybe he'll be the delight of our eyes, and we'll consider him to be our son. And how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised. She then later on believes in the Risalat of Hazrat Musa and asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give her najat from Pharaoh. So Hazrat Musa alayhi birth, similar to the birth of Imam Mahdi. And then the birth of Hazrat Isa alayhi and him claiming to be the Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the what age of when he's only in the arms of his mother, only a few days old maybe. You read the story of Hazrat Maryam, that she brings this baby in her arms, and right away people start questioning her. Ma kana abuka imra'a sawin wa ma kana ummuki baghiya. that your father was not a bad person, your mother was not a rebellious woman. What is this that you brought? She remained silent. She was silent, and she, for asharat ilay, she pointed toward him. They said, him, how is he going to speak? You should be answering. She only pointed toward Hazrat Isa, and he spoke. He said what? Inni Abdullah, atani al-kitab, waj'alani nabiyya. He announces that he's the servant of Allah, not the son of Allah. He's been given the book. He's been made the Nabi while he's only in the arms of his mother. So it's not like you don't have the proofs already that there has been cases of those who have announced their imamat and their risalat when they're only little kids. Another example is Hazrat Yahya. Quran says, Ya Yahya khudil kitaba biquwwatin wa ataynahu al-hukma sabiyya. Oh Yahya, hold on to this book firmly. And we gave him shari'at, we gave him the doctrine and the hukm while he was sabi. Look up sabi in Arabic. Sabi means a child. So these are two examples from Quran. One of Hazrat Isa, second of Hazrat Yahya. Both were made Nabi and given this hukm at the age of, very tender age. Now at this point, although it's not part of the discussion, this is the Mashiach of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he wants, he announces the Nabuwat and the Risalat of someone in the arms of his mother while they are still infants. And if he wants, he delays the Risalat of someone for 40 years. And that is in the case of the Holy Prophet. That does not mean Hazrat Isa is superior to the Prophet, because Prophet started his Risalat at the age of 40. And Hazrat Isa started when he was only a child in the arms of his mother. They were always Nabi, both of them. It's the Risalat which is given to them at a certain age. It is the Mashiach of Allah that he gives some right away and he holds back for some because of different reasons. And then if you look within that Imam Jawad, والسلام, he became Imam at the age of 8. Imam Ali Naqsh, he became Imam at the age of 9. Age is not the in Imamat. Since Imamat is not inherited, it's not a democratic process. Rather, it's a position given by the consent of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet. So Prophet was announcing that there will be 12 Naqib, or there will be 12 Khulafa after me, all from Banu Hashim, all from Quraysh, from the children of Ali and Batul, 9th one after Hussein, son of Hassan Askari. This is the decree and the consent by Allah. So the criteria is knowledge, criteria is piety, because there were other children of Imams and Ma'sumin. Not all of them were considered to be Imam and Ma'sum. That's what happened with the different firaq and madahib that came into existence from the madhab tashayyu. That's where they lost the path. That they did not believe or follow that initial call from the Prophet, whom already had announced that these will be the Imams. So you have the Ismailis, who instead of following 7th Imam, they consider Ismail ibn Jafar al-Sadiq to be the 7th Imam. There were Waqifis who stopped at the 7th Imam, considering him to be the Mahdi and the one who is in occultation because of the money that they were possessing. And many other such firaq that came into existence. So this is enough proof that yes, Imam was only 5 years old, and there's nothing wrong in a 5-year-old to be the Imam of the Ummah, because he is not going to be learning and attaining the knowledge from the makatib or the madaris or the institutions of this world. Rather, he's brought this knowledge from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already. And then sometimes the doubt is created that how can someone live for such a long life? How can someone attain such a long life, rather? Doesn't age slow Imam down? How does he get to live for so long? You count minus 255 from 1442, do quick math, close to 1200 years have passed. It's 1200 years. Someone who's 1200 years old, we see people who are 70 and 80 in a lifetime, they start to slow down. Imam is 1200 years old, almost. How does he get to live so long? Well, that's where we need to understand that it is the Mashiach of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam is not aging as we speak. that he would be 1200 years old. He's alive for 1200 years, but he's not as how an 1200-year-old would be. He would be like a 40-year-old. So not like a 1200-year-old person. You won't be able to say by looking at Imam that he's even 100 years old, because we've seen 100-year-old people around us. So age is not the factor here, or doesn't slow Imam down. Can a person live for decades? Is it possible logically? Well, of course, this is an answer that you have to give to the people. We can understand that Imam is young. He's not aging like that as the process of aging is concerned. But we have examples from Quran. Look at the example of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ فَلَبِثَ فِيهِمْ أَلْفَ سَنَةٍ إِلَّا خَمْسِينَ عَامًا. That we sent Nuh to his qawm, and he stayed and remained with them for sure 950 years. Alfa sana, 1,000 except 50 years. So that's 950 years. God knows how old he was. You refer to Qasasul Anbiya, some mention 2,000, some mention 2,500 years old. But 950 years of age of Hazrat Nuh is proven through the ayat of Quran. So 950 years of age of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. But the unfortunate part is that 950 years of propagation of Hazrat Nuh, and merely 82 people, or 80 or 82 people who come out as his followers. The one who did the tabligh, laylan wa nahara. If you go ahead and read Surah Nuh. Nuh means lamenting. The one who did Noha. The one who does Noha excessively, that's Nuh. That was not his name. This is because of his excessive Noha that he was called Nuh. And so he's mentioned with that name even in Quran. And he's reciting his own Noha in the ayat. That, oh Allah, I propagated your deen, laylan wa nahara, day and night. But every time I would stand up in front of them to propagate, فَجَعَلَهُمْ أَصَابِعَهُمْ فِي آذَانِهِمْ. They'll put their fingers in their ears. They'll put their cloak on top of their heads. They'll hurt me, they'll harm me, they'll do all of those things. And Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam would come back. He would have all of these wounds on his body. And when all of these wounds will be on his body, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send an angel to go ahead and rub the wings onto the body of Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam. And because the angel would rub his wings, all of these wounds would heal, and Hazrat Nuh would be ready to get back on his feet the next morning and start propagating. How ironic it is that when a Nabi of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is afflicted with wounds, an angel comes, rubs his wings, and Nabi is healed. But then when there's an angel who's suffering, whose wings have been taken away from him, when he sees a fauj of angels coming to the earth to greet the Holy Prophet for the birth of his grandson Imam Hussein, he says, take me with you. And when they bring him along, he comes to the Holy Prophet, congratulates him on the birth of his grandson, says, oh Prophet, you're happy today, you're joyful today, do shafa'at for me so that I'm giving my wings back. Prophet said, you've come to greet me on the birth of my grandson, take him to the cradle of my grandson, rub him against the cradle of the grandson, and he will be given the shafa'at that he's looking for. And when Fitrus was brought, he rubbed himself to the cradle of Imam Hussein. He was given the wings back, the shafa'at was done. He flew away saying, what? Man mithli, ana atiqul Hussein. Who is like me? I am the one who's been freed by Hussein. So there's a difference. And then also Rasulullah did not say rub him with the body of Hussein. Because if you rub him with the body of Hussein, that silsila will stop in the year 61 after Hijrah, after the shahadat of Imam Hussein. He said, no, rub him with the cradle of Hussein. So today, even when you go and rub yourself to the zari of Sayyid al-Shuhada, you will get the same results from it. So Hazrat Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam lived for 950 years. Our belief for Hazrat Isa alayhi salatu wasalam is what? That he was removed and he was lifted Surah Nisa talks about it, ayat number 157, 158. وَمَا قَتَلُوهُ وَمَا صَلَبُوهُ وَلَكِنْ شُبَّهَ لَهُمْ. And then the next ayah, بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. He wasn't crucified. He was not killed, but he was replaced by someone who looked like him, who resembled him. بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ. Rather, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought him toward himself. So what is our belief? That is still alive, and he will return when Imam Mahdi returns. Logically, these are the proofs from Quran. But logically speaking, if someone claims that to do something which is extraordinary, which is impossible to do, he says that I can walk over the water. Everybody will be excited. I want to see this happen. And then somehow they pull it off. You know, you see illusionists today, they do different acts, which is the illusion of our eyes. We don't see it, and then they perform that act. Houdini comes to your mind. So if someone says, I can walk over water, everybody will be excited. I want to see this happen myself. And then he walks over. Few months later, someone else comes, I can walk over the water. Still, this is something which is, you know, extraordinary thing. So still you're excited of seeing it. You go and watch it again. And then later on, another person comes and says, no longer appealing to you. Because two people have already done it. There's nothing new in it. Yes, it still is exciting, but not as exciting as it was the first time. And then if it becomes the norm, then of course it will lose its charm. So when something is done previously, then you really don't need any more proofs. How previous Anbiya have lived, how previous people in the time of other nations, not Nabi, not Rasul, ordinary people who got to live for such a long time. When they were able to survive for such a long life, then why would you have trouble believing that Imam Mahdi could be alive for such a long? And the biggest proof of all, does anyone deny the existence of shaitan? If shaitan can live a long life and misguide people, he said to Allah what? Rabbi fa'andirni ila yawmi yub'athun. Let me live until the day people be raised again. Qala fa'innaka minal munzarin. Allah said, okay, you've been reprieved. Ila yawmil waqtil ma'loom. Until the day which is only known to him. Not until the day yub'athun. So our belief is what? We believe that shaitan still exists. So when Allah can leave shaitan, who said that I will go ahead and misguide people, لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. My purpose of survival is to go ahead and misguide people. When Allah can let a person or shaitan to live for such a long life to misguide, why won't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let a guide, a hadi, someone who's there to guide people live for such a long time? Of course, natural laws are broken as Allah wishes to accommodate whatever he wants. Fire must burn, but it doesn't burn Hazrat Ibrahim. When he's thrown into these flames from far distant, Allah says to this fire, Ya naru kuni bardan wa salama ala Ibrahim. Oh fire, be cool and sound to Ibrahim. Don't let him be burnt into it. So the laws of the nature could be changed and altered if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes it that way. Last question in this reference, inshallah, I'll bring it towards the conclusion. Reason behind ghaibat and the use of ghaib imam. Why does he have to live such a long life? Why can someone be born today and called Mahdi? As is the belief of Ahl Sunnah. They believe in Imam Mahdi, but they believe that he's going to be born one day. So we already proved that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hujjat, and the hujjat and the proof of Allah must remain on earth. The riwayat that I had recited the other night, that even if it was one day remaining until Qiyamah, Allah will prolong this day for such a long time until Imam Mahdi reappears. Ghaib Imam is like that sun behind the clouds which provides sunlight, even if it's hiding. People have to be on their toes waiting for Imam, like they should be when they're waiting for their death. Imam is looking after us at all times. We might be heedless of Imam, but he isn't heedless of us for one moment, brothers and sisters. And that too, which is the khas inayat of Imam toward the scholars. I'll conclude with this magnificent story of Sheikh Mufid. Sheikh Mufid, we know of his writings, most famously Irshad, that is one of his works, but many other things that he has produced. He's a great scholar, and his students, great students that he produced. And he was the faqih of the time. So this fiqahat did not start just recently as some people think. No, this fiqahat is going on since the occultation of Imam. A man came to Sheikh Mufid and from a far distant town, and he said to him that there's a woman who was pregnant, but she's dying, or she's dead. Should we deliver the baby and bury her, or should we bury her as is? Of course, you're looking at the time of Sheikh Mufid, almost 1,000 years ago. He said, don't bother delivering the baby. Just bury this woman as it is with the baby. This man took the fatwa, took the edict, took the mas'ala, and he went away. As he was returning, he saw a man riding his horse, quickly approached him. He said to him, Sheikh Mufid has changed his fatwa. Now he has just declared that, no, go ahead and do whatever it is possible to take the baby out of the womb first and then bury this woman. The man went back. He did according to this new fatwa of Sheikh Mufid. And of course, they were able to bring the baby alive, and then they went ahead and buried that woman. After a while, this whole story was narrated to Sheikh Mufid, that this is how it happened, and good thing that you thought of it and you sent someone to go ahead and change your original fatwa, and therefore we were able to save the baby. Otherwise, we would have buried that baby alive. After hearing this, Sheikh said to himself that I didn't send anyone. It is obvious that since the baby was alive, it must have been Imam Zamana who intervened. Now that I know that I have made a mistake in my judgments and in my verdicts, I will stop giving fatwas. I will no longer give any more fatwas. He went inside his house. He wouldn't come out to see those who would regularly visit him to ask him questions, until one day he receives a letter from Imam al-Asr. Imam writes to him, "Oh Shaykh, your duty is to give fatwa, and our duty is to watch over you and assist you whenever you make a mistake." In the writings that we find about Sheikh Mufid, it is narrated that in 30 years, 30 letters came from Imam Zamana to Sheikh Mufid. In all of them, Imam referred to him as Lil Akhil A'azz Sadid al-Sheikh al-Mufid, dear, honorable, and upright brother. Just imagine the honor Sheikh Mufid has to be called and addressed like this from Imam of the time. So definitely Imam has a special anayat toward ulama and the scholars, and because of obvious reasons, and the scholars of that caliber for that reason. So therefore we should be very thankful to the scholars that we have today who have made things easy for us as far as our following is concerned, as far as our deen is concerned. The deen which has reached us with so much difficulty, there's so much sacred blood is being shed for this deen, we should not let it go squander or perish. That deen for which someone like Sayyid al-Shuhada, Imam Hussein, is willing to give his life and sacrifice himself. You should be taking care of that deen, especially if there's a waris of this deen who's waiting to reappear. Imam Hussein gave everything. Whatever he had brought with him, he sacrificed, because he knew that there is a bigger picture and a bigger thing to achieve. But what was the mistake, and what was the fault of the young kids who were with Imam Hussein? We understand the reasoning why Imam brought everyone together, because he feels that they're safer with me. If he had left the young kids back, it is easily possible for Yazid and his governor of Medina to go ahead and capture the family of Imam, put him into the prison while Imam is still alive. Imam would rather keep the family with him. What is the fault of the young kids, that 6-month-old that Imam brings to Maqtal, and he says, "You are here to kill me. But this 6-month-old is also hungry and thirsty for 3 days. What is his fault? Similarly, the 4-year-old daughter of Imam Hussein, what's her fault that you are treating her like this? When a 4-year-old sees the head of her father raised onto the spear and she cries, how should you deal with this situation? You should pay respect. You should deal with mercy. You should deal with compassion, because first of all, this child is an orphan. Secondly, she can see the head of her father in front of her eyes. That itself is a very heart-wrenching scene. And so it's only obvious for her to cry. All you've got to do is put your hand with shafqat on her head. Give her sukoon, give her solace, give her comfort. But what did Sakina receive? She only received slaps on her face. She only received taziana to be hit upon her. That when she was crying, looking at the head of her father, they would slap her, they would hit her with taziana to the point that this little girl fell onto the ground. Then when she fell on the ground from her ride, Imam Hussein, at night time, Imam's head comes down from the top of the spear, and then it does not move. These people come to Bibi Zainab. They say that Hussein's head is on the ground and it refuses to move. So go ahead and see what is up with it. Janab Zainab understands that something that belongs to Imam Hussein is missing. Once again, she goes out and she sees that Sakina is no longer there. She goes out and she's searching for Sakina the way she was searching for her the other day on the day of Ashur. And again, she's looking for the little girl of Imam Hussein. Imam had given specific advice in reference to Bibi Sakina. Now she goes, she looks around in that dark bayaban. She finds that this little girl is sleeping on the lap of another person. She goes up and says, "Oh lady, can I have our child back? Because our caravan will not move without her. Our father's head will not move without her." The lady gives Sakina back to Bibi Zainab. As Janab Zainab receives this little girl, she says to that lady, "Thank you for taking care of our girl in this darkness, in this bayaba. If there's any hajat, tell us. We are from the household of the Holy Prophet. We'll do dua for you." That lady said, "Oh Zainab, but you did not recognize your own mother. This is Fatima Zahra alayhi salam. Ajrukum Allah. May Allah give you no grief, no sorrow, except the grief and sorrow of Ahlul Bayt." This qafla eventually comes to Sham, and how they were dealt with in Sham. That this girl who was in the zindan of Sham, she starts weeping and crying again. Yazid hears the sound of someone crying, and she wasn't the only one. There were other people who started weeping, looking at this little girl. He said, "Who's crying?" Said, "The daughter of Hussein is crying." He said, "What does she want?" He said, "She only asked for Baba." And Baba, Yazid says, "Send her the head of Hussein." The head of Imam Hussein is brought in this tasht, which is covered. They bring this head to the little girl. She says, "I don't need food," thinking that they have sent food for her, that she may be hungry. And they remove this covering and to reveal the head of Imam Hussein. And as soon as she receives and sees the head of Imam, right away she embraces the head of her father. She weeps. As she's weeping and crying, everyone in Zindan starts to weep and cry. And while everybody was crying, in the midst of all of this little girl, she left this world. ألا لعنة الله القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. مات حسين.
या वो सीना जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना सीने पे सोती थी, हाय हाय जिस सीने पे सोती थी मासूम सकीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, दर्द से जरा जालिम बाबा को न रोऊंगी, मैं गोद में मादर की आराम से सोऊंगी, बेरहम नहीं रोने, हाय हाय बेरहम नहीं रोने, फरियाद सुनीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, है मौत की खामोशी तारीकी जिंदा में, क्या जुर्म किया लोगों मासूम से मेहमाने, कोई और तो मासूमा है, कोई और तो मासूमा यूं कैदी हुई ना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, माशाल्लाह, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, कोई भी पढ़ो आराम से, हर वक्त चमकता था करबल में मदीने में, तावीज़ की मानंद था शाबीर के सीने में, गुम हो गया वो कैसे है, गुम हो गया वो कैसे जिंदा में नगीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, सरदार सकीना को जिंदा में दफन करके सज्जाद ये कहते थे ना कब्र मेरा मर के, ताहशर रुलाएगी, हाय हाय ताहशर रुलाएगी तेरी मौत सकीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, सज्जाद जो जिंदा से हो कैद खत्म मेरी, क्या कहना ये सुहरा से तुमको है कसम मेरी, मैं दफन हूँ जिंदा में, आए मैं दफन हूँ जिंदा में, आबाद मदीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, जिस सीने पे सोती थी, हाय हाय जिस सीने पे सोती थी मासूम सकीना, जिंदा में सकीना को याद आया वो सीना, या हुसैन या हुसैन या बात करा ना, हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन या हुसैन क्या बात, या हुसैन या हुसैन, या Ya Abbas, 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 Ya Abbas. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Mutawajjih ziyarat.
अस्सलाम अलैकुम या अबा अब्दुल्लाह, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या इब्न रसूल अल्लाह, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या इब्न अमीर अल मोमिनीन, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या इब्न फातिमा ज़हरा, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या इब्न फज़ल अल अब्बास, अस्सलाम अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या गरीब अल गुरबा, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या अली इब्न मूसा रिदा, अस्सलाम अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू, अस्सलाम अलैकुम या साहिब अल असर व ज़मान, अस्सलाम अलैका या इमाम अल-इंस वल जान, अस्सलाम अलैका या शरीक अल-कुरान, अल-अमान अल-अमान अल-अमान, अस्सलाम अलैकुम व रहमतुल्लाहि व बरकातुहू।
Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Ya Ali.